She didn't want riches or fame. All she ever wanted was a decent future for her daughter. Julia, 38, knew life through the lens of sacrifice. Every morning began at 5 a.m., while silence still ruled the corridors of the boarding house. The small room where she lived with her 7-year-old daughter, Isabella, was cramped but filled with love. The fan buzzed constantly, cracks spread across the walls. But Isabella's little drawings, taped with care, brought the space to life. Breakfast was always the same: stale bread with margarine, a sip of black coffee, and a kiss on her daughter's forehead. Isabella never complained. Quite the opposite, she smiled. She dreamed of becoming an artist, loved drawing flowers and castles, and Julia encouraged her every day. Even though she wasn't sure if she could keep Isabella in school for another year, she had worked as a nanny for nearly 2 decades. Julia was known in the neighborhood as reliable, attentive, and loving. That her pay barely covered rent, food, and public transportation. She had tried selling costume jewelry on the side, cleaned houses whenever possible, and still, the end of each month was a battle. That Monday, after a long day watching hyperactive twins, Julia was caught off guard by her employer, Mrs. Clarice, sitting calmly in the living room, tea in hand, and a calculating look in her eyes. Clarice invited Julia to sit down. Her tone was different, almost secretive. "Julia, have you ever heard of a contract marriage?" The question was odd. Julia chuckled awkwardly, thinking it was a joke, but Clarice remained serious. She explained with cold, direct details that her brother-in-law, Leonardo, needed a temporary wife, a partner, in appearance only for social events, family gatherings, and to present an image to company investors. Nothing emotional, just strategic. "You're discreet, trustworthy, and know how to behave in public," Clarice said. "You were the first person I thought of." The offer sounded absurd. But the money was real. More than 3 times Julia's yearly salary. Enough to pay off her debts, move out of the boarding house, enroll Isabella in a good school, and finally breathe without fear. Julia asked for one night to think. That night, sitting on her thin mattress, with Isabella asleep beside her, Julia cried. She questioned if this was right, if selling her image, even in an agreement, was honorable. But then she looked at her daughter's peaceful face, at the drones on the wall, and decided she would do it for her. The next morning, she said yes, not knowing that this yes would change everything. The address was another world. Julia, used to simple streets and the noise of buses, now walked through the gates of a gated community. Trees lined the pristine roads, everything was too clean, too quiet. A security guard escorted her to the front door, and there she met a world she never thought she belonged to. The house was massive, not just in size but in presence: tall doors, glass and steel facade, modern furniture, art on the walls. The air smelled like expensive flowers and polished wood. Julia, with her modest dress and worn-out handbag, felt like an intruder in a museum. In the living room, Leonardo was waiting. Tall, elegant, with a serious expression and flawless posture. He greeted her with a quick handshake, almost businesslike. "Please, sit," he said. Without wasting time, he began explaining the terms of the contract. "For 6 months, you'll be my wife on paper. We'll attend events, dinners, public appearances together. I don't expect affection. I expect discretion and commitment. The contract is clear. And, as you'll see, quite generous." As he spoke, Julia tried to understand this man. There was something wounded beneath his coldness, like someone who had built walls so high, even he got lost behind them. The contract was handed to her. Julia read every line. Everything was spelled out: appropriate attire, expected behavior, scheduled appearances. Nothing about her personal life, no emotional involvement, and at the bottom, the amount. It was higher than she had imagined. She took a deep breath, picked up the pen, and signed. It was official. Julia was now, on paper, the wife of a stranger. The days that followed were intense: image consulting, etiquette lessons, posture training. Julia went through a full transformation. Her clothes were custom-made, her shoes imported, the dinners full of rules. She wrote everything down, determined to get everything right. In the mirror, she saw a woman she barely recognized, and she wondered, would she lose herself in the process? Then came the first event, a charity dinner with the city's elite. Julia was nervous. her dress deep red with subtle details. Her hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She barely recognized her own reflection. Leonardo was waiting in the living room, wearing a flawless suit. He looked at her from head to toe and simply said, "You'll do fine." In the car, silence filled the space. Julia tried to memorize names she needed to know, topics to avoid, stories to tell if anyone asked how they met. They arrived. Flashes from photographers, whispers, curious stares. Leonardo held her waist naturally. He smiled, if only slightly. Julia held her composure. She smiled too. Talked to businessmen, elegant women, wealthy young socialites, and surprised everyone, including herself. Midway through the night, Leonardo leaned in and whispered, "You're doing very well." It was the first time he had praised her, and for a moment, she saw something different in his eyes, almost human. Back in the car, the silence felt less tense. Julia, exhausted, leaned her head against the window and whispered, "I think I survived." Leonardo gave a small smile, barely visible. "But it was there. The next step," he said, "is a family dinner. It'll be trickier. They notice everything, especially my mother. Prepare yourself." Julia nodded. And for the first time, she felt something new. Not fear. Curiosity. Who was this man behind the armor? And why did she feel that he, too, was beginning to change? Because of her, she didn't know it yet, but that contract would be about more than appearances. It was Sunday. The sun was lazily setting behind tall buildings as Julia stepped once again into Leonardo's car. This time, her dress was floral, more discreet, less sophisticated, chosen carefully by her image consultant to give the impression of a delicate, well-mannered woman. She held a small bouquet of flowers in her hands, bought with her own money, even though she knew Leonardo's family probably had arrangements more expensive than she could imagine. The ride was silent. Leonardo seemed even more tense than usual, his eyes fixed on the road, hands tight on the steering wheel. Julia tried to break the ice. "Your mother, is she very traditional?" Demanding, observant, and extremely protective. Julia swallowed hard. When they arrived, the house was a more classical version of Leonardo's mansion. Tall white columns, a garden with a fountain, roses aligned with mathematical perfection. A maid welcomed them at the door with a forced smile. Inside, the room was impeccable. Leonardo's mother, Mrs. Helena, was the embodiment of elegant severity. Beige linen suit, pearl necklace, hair in a perfectly tight bun. She looked Julia up and down before offering a smile. "So, this is your wife, Leonardo?" "Yes, mother, this is Julia." Julia offered her hand and a smile. "Very pleased to meet you, Mrs. Helena. I brought flowers." "Oh, how thoughtful. I like women who pay attention to the details." "You can leave them with Maria." Dinner was served shortly after. The table was long, spotless, and full of silverware and different glasses. Julia sat next to Leonardo and across from his mother. Also present were Leonardo's brother, his chatty sister-in-law, and a teenage niece who didn't lift her eyes from her phone. The questions started off subtly. Then, they became sharper. "So, Julia, where did you study again? What did you do before getting married? Are you planning to have children?" Julia took a deep breath before each answer. She recalled every line of the script she'd rehearsed. But deep inside, she was tired of pretending. Even so, she held the role firmly, smiled, replied gently, fake normalcy. At one point, the teenage niece looked up and asked, "Do you have TikTok?" Julia laughed. The spontaneity of the question broke the tension for a second. "I barely know how to use my phone, let alone TikTok." Laughter followed. Even Mrs. Helena gave a faint smile. Leonardo looked at Julia with unexpected admiration, a sparkle of authenticity. Something no etiquette class could ever teach. After dinner, while the others had coffee on the veranda, Mrs. Helena pulled Julia aside. "May I be honest?" "Of course, ma'am. You surprised me. I thought you were just a temporary convenience. But I see there's more. My son, he's less cold when you're around." Julia didn't know what to say. She just smiled. On the way back home, Leonardo was quiet, but as they parked in front of the mansion, he turned to her and said, "Thank you for today." "Why are you thanking me?" "I only did what we agreed. Maybe, but today, you made me feel like I was part of a family." Julia said nothing, but inside, something stirred. A warmth in her chest. Maybe. Maybe she was also starting to believe in the lie. In the days that followed, something shifted in their routine. Leonardo began lingering longer over breakfast. He asked Julia trivial questions: what movies she liked, what food reminded her of childhood. Sometimes he'd show up just to see her practicing her posture for the next event. Julia, in turn, caught herself smiling for no reason. She missed him when he wasn't around, but that calm had an expiration date, and the first crack came on a quiet Friday afternoon. Julia was in the garden, reading a book borrowed from Leonardo's library. The air was fresh, the silence comforting. That's when the housekeeper approached, visibly uneasy, holding an envelope in her hand. This was left at the gate. No sender. Julia opened it. Inside, photos of her, of Leonardo, together at events, in the car, in front of his mother's house. And then one final photo, her alone, dressed simply, holding a child in her arms, still a nanny. On the back, a message written in cold ink: how much is a well-told lie worth? The ground beneath her seemed to crack open. She ran inside. Looked for Leonardo. He wasn't there. She called. No answer. Out of range. Her chest tightened. Someone knew. Someone was watching. Was it blackmail? A warning? A threat? When Leonardo returned later that evening, Julia was waiting, sitting on the armchair. The envelope on her lap. He looked tired, removed his blazer. Saw her expression and froze. It arrived today, she said, handing him the photos. Leonardo flipped through them slowly, silent. Then he walked to the bar, poured himself a whiskey. Took a sip. Only then did he speak. I've been expecting this since the beginning. What do you mean? Someone from the company, or my family, or someone from your past. Someone doesn't want this arrangement to continue. So what do we do? Leonardo turned to her. His voice was lower, slower, more human. We continue, because now, this isn't just an arrangement anymore. Julia froze. Leonardo realized what he had said but didn't take it back. He stepped closer, stopped in front of her. When I signed that contract, I wanted control, distance, but you disarm me, you make me trust, you make me feel human again. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't the same silence from before. It was heavy, intimate, dangerous, a feeling neither of them had planned for, a feeling that no contract had prepared them for. Outside, the world was conspiring, but inside that house, two strangers were slowly discovering something real. The next morning, the silence between them had changed. It was no longer the awkward stillness of strangers. It was the silence of questions waiting for courage. Julia woke up before Leonardo. She had coffee alone, staring out at the garden, heart tight in her chest. She was no longer sure what was real and what was still part of the performance. Leonardo appeared in the kitchen not long after. His eyes were tired. They didn't greet each other, just shared a look. He poured himself coffee, sat across from her. I have to travel. Just 2 days, Chicago. It's important for the board. All right, he hesitated. When I get back, we might need to review a few clauses in our contract. Julia frowned. Review. Some things have changed. The way people see you, the way I see you. Her heart pounded. A part of her wanted to ask what exactly had changed, but she held back. He didn't offer explanations, and she didn't want to beg for truths. That afternoon, Leonardo left. And with him, he took the fragile peace Julia had been building inside herself. The next day, an unexpected visit. Bianca. Leonardo Sachs-FIANC a cutie. She arrived unannounced, beautiful, confident, with the kind of elegance that never had to be taught. I came to pick up a few things I left. And of course, to meet the new Mrs. Vasconcelos. Julia welcomed her with a polite smile. But inside, everything bold. Bianca walked through the house like she still owned it. Her words were sweet, her intentions sharp. So, what were you before again? Oh right, a nanny, wasn't it? Must be quite a shock to be surrounded by all this silverware. Julia inhaled slowly, didn't reply. Just smiled, the kind of smile she had trained for. Well, if you need advice. Leonardo likes white roses in the bedroom, hates sweet perfume, and despises when someone touches the right-hand drawer in his office. Bianca left just as she came, in silence, but leaving a storm in her wake. That afternoon, Something gnawed at Julia's curiosity. Her fingers hesitated over the right-hand drawer, and finally, opened it. Inside, an old wooden box. Photos, letters, a locket with a child's picture. And at the bottom, a medical report. Name: Rafael Vasconcelos. Diagnosis: leukemia. Julia's blood ran cold. She had heard Leonardo had a brother, but not like this, not with so much pain. That evening, Leonardo returned. She didn't wait. Why didn't you ever tell me about Rafael? He stopped, frozen. His eyes hardened. What were you doing going through my things? I wasn't snooping. I was provoked. Bianca was here. She. Of course. Always an excuse. It hit her like a slap. His tone, his wall. You ask me to trust you, but you hide who you are. I'm not your enemy, Leonardo. I'm here. I'm trying. You had no right. That drawer wasn't for you. Then maybe I was never truly a part of this. Leonardo turned his back, walked toward the hallway, stopped at the door of his office. Without turning around, he said, maybe this contract needs to end before the deadline. The word sliced through her. Julia stood there, silent, tears filling her eyes, because it wasn't just the contract ending. Something deeper was unraveling. The next morning, she packed her things. She spoke to no one. She left a short note on the bed. Don't worry. I kept my part until you no longer wanted me to. And she walked out, back to the small apartment where it all began, where there were still bus horns and the smell of bread from the corner bakery. But now everything felt too small for the pain she carried inside. Time passed slowly. For Julia, each day away from Leonardo felt like a lifetime. She tried to keep busy, took small babysitting jobs around the neighborhood, but her eyes no longer sparkled like before. Her smile was cautious now, and her nights were filled with memories that refused to fade. She would replay everything in her mind. Their first meeting, to dinners, the rehearsed stories, the first time he called her impressive. And of course, the fight, the way he looked at her before she left. The pain of feeling discarded from a place she had briefly called home. Meanwhile, Leonardo couldn't find peace either. The silence in the mansion was deafening. Julia's absence echoed in every corner. The breakfasts once shared in quiet comfort were now eaten in a cold, empty kitchen. He didn't know if it was pride, fear, or pure cowardice that kept him from reaching out. Until one night, flipping through Raphael's old letters, he found a note tucked between the pages, a simple sentence in his brother's handwriting. Love doesn't knock twice the same way. If you run from it out of fear, it might never return. Leonardo closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and decided. He got in the car and drove through the city, out of the clean, wealthy streets of gated neighborhoods and back into the real world. Into her world. He still remembered where she lived. He wasn't sure she'd open the door, wasn't even sure she'd want to see him, but he needed to try. It was already dark when he arrived. The light was on. He knocked. His heart pounded so loud he could barely hear the footsteps behind the door. And then it opened. Their eyes met. And for a second, both froze. Leonardo, she asked, breath caught in her throat. Hi, Julia, can I come in? She hesitated. Her heart raced, but she stepped aside. He entered slowly, looked around. The small, cozy apartment. So different from the mansion where it all started, and yet, it felt warmer somehow. I shouldn't have let things end the way they did, he said, straight to the point. You didn't just let it end, Leonardo. You threw me out, like I meant nothing. I know. And I hate myself for it. He looked away for a second, then back at her. I was scared, Julia, scared of what I was feeling, scared that you saw a part of me I've tried to bury for years. Her eyes welled up. I wasn't trying to invade your privacy. I just wanted to understand you. I wanted to know you. The real you. And you found out, he said softly. You discovered the deepest wound I carry. Rafael. Was everything to me. And when I lost him, I swore I'd never get close to anyone again, because loving someone that deeply, and then losing them, it almost destroyed me. She stepped closer, touched his hand gently. It does hurt, but love also heals, Leonardo. It's the only thing that really heals. Silence fell over the room, but this time, it was full of truth. I don't want a contract anymore, he said at last. I don't want to pretend. I don't want to perform. I want you, with your fears, your doubts, and your big, stubborn heart. Her breath caught. Are you asking me to come back? Yes, but not to the mansion, not to the role, to me, to whatever messy, honest thing this is between us. Julia paused. Her voice was almost a whisper. I haven't even found my way back to myself yet. Double quotes. She looked up at him, eyes full. But maybe. If it's by your side. I'll find the way. He pulled her into an embrace. And for the first time in years, both of them cry, softly, together. To broken hearts, finally beating as one. Starting over doesn't mean going back to the beginning. It means moving forward, with a renewed heart. For Julie and Leonardo, their new life together began without lavish luxury or rehearsed rules, but it was filled with truth, and above all, respect. Leonardo decided to spend more time away from the company. Not because he didn't love his work, but because he wanted to rebuild something inside himself. Julia went back to working part-time as a childcare provider. She was determined to keep her feet on the ground, to remember where she came from. The house they moved into was smaller, but cozy. A charming two-story with a small yard, where Julia planted flowers. Leonardo installed a hammock in the garden, saying he needed to learn how to rest. And every day, Julia was the one teaching him how. There were stumbles, arguments about schedules, upbringing differences, and jealousy disguised as concern. But now, unlike before, they didn't run away. They talked, they listened, they grew. One Sunday, while washing dishes side by side, Leonardo said without looking at her, I've been thinking about reaching out to Bianca. Julia paused, stomach twisting, but she waited. Why? To apologize. I never really settled things with her. And if we want to build something pure. I need to clear the past too. She took a deep breath and agreed. A few days later, Leonardo met Bianca. The conversation was mature. No bitterness, no relapse. When he came home, he brought flowers. Not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. Thank you for trusting me, even when everything inside you wanted to scream. Julia smiled. That night, they made love like never before. For the first time, without reservations, like two souls finally making a home inside each other. Months passed. Julia discovered she was pregnant during a routine doctor visit. She didn't know how to tell him. She was scared. She thought Leonardo wasn't ready, but when he saw the test in her trembling hands, he smiled like a child. Are we going to be parents? Yes. He knelt down, kissed her belly. And said, thank you for giving me a new chance to love without fear. That night, lying side by side, Julia asked, do you think we'll manage? We survived a contract, a lie, and a loss. Now, we'll live the best truth, ours, and their hearts full, with the future unfolding before them. They slept in peace. Time passed with both urgency and sweetness. Each month of Julia's pregnancy was lived as a rediscovery. Leonardo devoured books about fatherhood, while Julia sang to her belly, whispering to the future. The baby had become the strongest bond in this unlikely story. The birth was not easy. It was early morning when the contractions started, and Leonardo, nervous as never before, almost forgot the hospital bag at home. At the hospital, Julia gripped his hand tightly. Through tears and pain, she looked into his eyes and said, we're going to make it together, he answered, eyes watering. And they did. A little girl. Lara. Small, rosy, eyes closed and fists clenched like she was born strong. When they placed her in Julia's arms, she cried silently. When Leonardo held her, he cried out loud, you're what I never knew I needed, he whispered. The first days were tough, sleepless nights, colic, insecurities, but also laughter, sweet scents, and little miracles shaped like sleepy smiles. Leonardo took paternity leave. He wanted to live every moment. He carried Lara, sang out of tune, learned to change diapers and prepare bowls. Julia looked at him tenderly. She never imagined the cold, closed man would become such a present father. You've changed, she said one night. No, he replied. You taught me how to recognize myself again. Lara grew, and with her, so did their love. The house was now scattered with photos on the walls, and a new routine. On Sundays, they had picnics in the garden. Julia taught Lara to smell flowers. Leonardo read stories with funny voices. One day, Leonardo surprised Julia by taking her back to where it all began. The old mansion where Julia had arrived as a nanny. It was empty, but he led her to the garden, where a small wooden structure stood, like a chapel. Inside, a simple altar with a photo of Raphael and a bench in front of a cross. I wanted him to see what life has become, Juliet, and I wanted to ask you. He knelt down, took a small box from his pocket. Will you marry me for real? No contract, no facade, just the three of us. You, me, and Laura. Julia cried. Smiled. And said yes. The wedding was simple. In their backyard, a light dress, garden flowers, true friends. Donna Helena carried Laura to the altar in her arms. At the end, Leonardo toasted, I built empires, but it was in this small home that I found everything that truly matters. And so, between pain, forgiveness, and rebirths, Julie and Leonardo lived not a fairy tale, but something better, a real story, where love was learned, earned, and lived with truth. Not every story begins with a kiss, and not every story needs a traditionally happy ending. Sometimes, the true happy ending is one built over time, with forgiveness, with difficult choices, and with the courage to try again. Julie and Leonardo were not perfect. They were human, with flaws, painful pasts, and deep fears. But they chose to walk together, even with scars, and it was in that journey, between stumbles and new beginnings, that they found what many search for a lifetime. True love. If you've made it this far, perhaps you wonder, does love still exist? In this hurried, cynical world, the answer lies in stories like this one. Stories where the heart speaks louder than pride. Where forgiveness is worth more than being right. Where I love you isn't said on impulse, but lived with daily actions. Leonardo found his brother again in memories and in the love he learned to nurture. Julia discovered she wasn't fragile, as people said. She was strong. Strong like only someone who truly loves can be. And Laura, their daughter, grew up in a home where imperfections were seeds for a solid, genuine love. Love doesn't always arrive at the right time, but it always finds a way to bloom when watered with patience, truth, and dedication. Maybe you're waiting for a love like this. Maybe you've already lived one, or maybe you're trying to rebuild a love that seemed lost. Whatever your story is, remember, everyone deserves to be loved, and everyone is capable of loving, even after pain, even with fear, because in the end, love isn't about eternal promises. It's about daily choices, and the most beautiful one is choosing to stay, even when leaving would be easier. This story was just one, but it can inspire many more. So you can also believe it's possible to start over and to be truly happy. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe that love is still possible. Sometimes, a simple story can rekindle hope in the chest of someone who almost gave up. And remember, no matter where you came from or what happened to you, true love doesn't impose itself. It's built, day by day, with patience, choices, and courage. Until the next story. And may it also find a special place in your heart.